The cafeteria at Skyview High hummed like an overworked machine. Trays clattered, voices tangled, and the smell of reheated fries hung thick under the fluorescent lights. The air carried the mix of bleach and exhaustion that every high school seemed to share, snow pressed against the long windows, the flakes melting into silver veins that ran down the glass. Riley Matthews sat near the window, her backpack hooked around one chair leg to keep it from sliding. Her prosthetic leg rested still under the table, the carbon fiber cold against her skin. Across from her, Sage Brennan was talking too fast about the boy from calculus, who still had not noticed her. Riley nodded at the right moments, half listening, half watching the snow thicken beyond the glass. Then she heard it. Raised voices. At first, it sounded like the usual noise of lunch, a loud laugh, a brief argument over a seat, but then something shifted in the tone. The laughter sharpened. The room started to hush the way a forest quiets before lightning. Near the entrance, a crowd was forming. Kyle Pearson stood at the center, tall, athletic, and cruel in the casual way of boys who had never been challenged. He had a phone in one hand and a grin that looked practiced. Cornered against the wall was Brianna Chen, a freshman Riley knew from book club. Brianna held her tray tight enough that milk sloshed in its carton. Kyle's voice carried across the room. "Is it true your family's restaurant got shut down? My dad says you failed health inspection." Brianna shook her head quickly. "That's not true." Her voice was small, almost swallowed by the hum of the cafeteria. Kyle leaned closer, smiling for the audience. "Guess you're all heading back to China then." A ripple of uneasy laughter moved through the crowd. Someone whispered. Someone else raised a phone. Riley felt the heat rise under her collar. The muscles in her back tightened. She knew that laughter, that cowardly sound people made when they were relieved, the cruelty was aimed at someone else. Before she could talk herself out of it, she pushed her chair back. The legs screeched against the tile, cutting through the noise. Sage looked up, eyes wide. "Riley, don't." But Riley was already moving. The crowd parted as she walked forward. The carbon foot of her prosthetic clicked softly with each step, a metronome of resolve. Kyle turned at the sound, grin widening when he saw her. "Oh, look," he said loudly, drawing the circle tighter. "The rescue team's here. Squad." The word hit her like a slap. The room held its breath for a beat. Riley stopped 2 steps away, her pulse pounding hard enough to taste metal. "Leave her alone, Kyle." He tilted his head, voice dripping amusement. "Better than being half a person." "Right." A few nervous laughs escaped the crowd. Brianna's eyes filled, her shoulders curling in on themselves. Sage was at Riley's shoulder now, silent but steady. Riley's voice came out even. "At least I'm whole where it counts." For a moment, no one moved. The fluorescent buzz filled the silence. Kyle's grin faltered, then returned, thinner. "That's enough." Mr. Patterson, the gym teacher, pushed through the students. His whistle bounced against his chest. "Kyle, principal's office." "Now." Kyle muttered something under his breath but obeyed. "Svaga Faust," face flushing red. As he walked away, he looked back over his shoulder. The look was a promise, not a word. This wasn't over. The crowd deflated, disappointment replacing curiosity. Mr. Patterson gave Riley and Sage a quick nod, not approval exactly, but acknowledgement, and followed Kyle out. Brianna stood frozen, tray trembling. Riley approached slowly, palms open. "Hey! You okay?" Brianna shook her head, tears sliding down her cheeks. Riley hesitated, then stepped closer, wrapping her arms gently around the girl. The contact was brief, almost awkward, but enough. Sage shifted position to block the view of lingering onlookers. "Kyle's an idiot," Sage said flatly. "Everyone knows it." Brianna's voice came muffled against Riley's shoulder. My family's restaurant isn't closing. But people believe rumors. They stopped coming. What's the restaurant called? Riley asked. Golden Harvest. On North 27th. We'll come by, Riley said. Bring people. Word of mouth works both ways. Brianna blinked up at her, hope trembling in her expression. Really? Really? And if he or anyone else gives you trouble again, find me. Don't deal with it alone. The bell rang. Shrill and merciful. Conversations resumed. Shares scraped. And the world pretended nothing had happened. Riley gathered her things, hands shaking slightly now that the adrenaline had nowhere to go. The prosthetic felt heavier than usual, as if it knew what it had just carried her through. She moved down the hall beside Sage, surrounded by the rush of voices. Her body vibrated with leftover fear and anger. At her locker, she switched books with mechanical precision. English notebook, chemistry folder, pencil. The familiar order steadied her heartbeat. You good? Sage asked quietly. Yeah, Riley said, but her voice lacked conviction. Just hate that look people get. What look? The one they have when they realize they enjoyed watching someone get humiliated. Sage nodded, unsure what to say. Around them, the hallway buzzed with gossip, and Riley caught snippets of their story, already mutating. Kyle got owned. The leg girl snapped back. Chen cried again. Each version scraped away a little more empathy, reshaping courage into spectacle. By the time the final bell rang, her shoulders ached from tension. Outside, the sky was the color of unpolished steel. Wind funneled between buildings, carrying the smell of exhaust and snow. Riley zipped her brother's old Carhartt jacket higher and stepped into the cold. The first touch of wind burned her cheeks. Her prosthetic clicked softly on the concrete, steady and rhythmic. Sage walked beside her for a while until they reached the intersection where their routes split. You know Kyle's going to hate you even more now, Sage said. Probably, Riley replied, but maybe he'll think twice before picking someone smaller. Zaga studied her face. You're brave. You know, Riley gave a tired half-smile. Not brave, just tired of pretending not to see. They said goodbye. Sage's scarf whipped in the wind as she crossed the street. Riley turned east. Alone now, snowflakes gathered on her jacket, melting into dark spots that looked like bruises. 3 blocks from home, she passed Veterans Park. The memorial stones were half buried in snow, the engraved names filled with ice. The park was almost empty. Only a few tire tracks winding through the small parking lot. The silence here was different. Thick, heavy, the kind that made breath visible. Then she heard it. A motorcycle engine, low and resonant, rolled through the cold air. Another joined it, then faded. The sound vibrated in her chest, same pitch as her memory. The steady thrum of another engine from a different day in this very park. Beside the memorial. That was the day she had heard a stranger sobbing beside his bike. The memory flickered and vanished as headlights turned the corner, just passing traffic. But the sound lingered, coiling through her ribs like a secret only she understood. By the time she reached home, the world had turned to quiet gray. Light glowed from the kitchen window. Her mother moved inside, humming softly to a radio that whispered weather reports and warnings of dropping temperatures. The smell of cinnamon drifted through the cracked door. Riley stepped inside, shutting out the wind. The familiar creak of hinges greeted her like a sigh. She leaned against the wall for a moment, unstrapping her boot, feeling the weight of the day settle. Her fingers brushed the edge of the prosthetic near her knee. It was tender there, the skin warm beneath the liner. She could tell her mother about it. The confrontation, the cruelty. But not yet, not tonight. The words would sound too small in the soft light of the kitchen. Upstairs, she stood by her window, palm pressed to the glass. Outside, The street shimmered under a thin layer of frost. In the distance, a single car passed, headlights cutting through the falling snow. The world looked clean from up here, untouched by what had happened a few hours ago. Her reflection blurred in the glass. The carbon leg caught the faint light, the silver lightning bolts glowing like tiny scars. She thought of Brianna, of the look in her eyes. When hope finally pushed through the fear, maybe that was what mattered. Not winning, not looking brave, just refusing to look away. Downstairs, the radio voice faded into the sound of the heater kicking on. The house sighed, old wood settling against the cold. Riley turned from the window and sat on the edge of her bed, the ache in her leg pulsing slow and steady. She focused on her breathing until it matched the rhythm of that remembered engine. Low, constant, alive. Outside, the snow kept falling, blanketing the town in white silence. Somewhere beyond the dark horizon, a motorcycle engine rumbled again, faint but familiar, as if echoing her heartbeat. The sound meant something she could not yet name. A promise, maybe, or the beginning of one. And Riley Matthews, 14 years old, sat in the quiet of her room and did not know that a choice made months earlier, to stop for a stranger in pain, was already turning the gears of a story much larger than herself. The wind shifted, carrying that sound a little closer before the night swallowed it whole. Morning seeped into the house like pale milk poured across a cold table. Frost feathered the corners of Riley's window and turned each breath into a small cloud. She could almost see. The room smelled faintly of laundry soap and the metallic edge of winter. Her prosthetic leaned against the wall, blue and silver, catching the thin light, as if it remembered how to shine even when the sun refused. She sat on the edge of the bed and let the house speak to her. The heater rumbled in the vents. A pipe ticked once, then again, like a heartbeat finding its rhythm. She rubbed her palms together until warmth returned, then reached for the liner. She rolled the liner between both hands to warm it, then fitted the socket and sealed the sleeve with a care that bordered on reverence. It was a ritual, and it was a promise. Pressure gathered across tender skin near her knee, a dull ring of memory and effort. She breathed into it, adjusted the sock by the smallest degree, and felt the pressure ease. The little victories mattered. They added up to movement. Downstairs, her mother was already in the kitchen. A wooden spoon clicked the side of a pot. Bowls touched the counter with the soft, ceramic note that belonged to mornings in this house. Riley followed those sounds down the stairs, fingertips grazing the carved newel post she had used since she was small, as if touching it made the day agree to begin. The kitchen was warm enough to fog the windows. Oatmeal steamed in the pot, thick and glossy, carrying brown sugar and cinnamon through the air, until the room felt gentler than the world outside. Janet Matthews smiled at her, the kind of tired smile that had learned to outlast everything. Riley ladled oatmeal into a bowl and wrapped her fingers around the heat until the cold stepped back. The radio murmured near the fridge, a calm voice, naming wind speeds and lanes of black ice as if they were items on a grocery list. Snow clung to the outside glass in crooked triangles and melted slowly, as if reluctant to become water again. Her phone buzzed once on the table, a message from Sage, as predictable as sunrise. Walk or ride. Riley typed one word. Walk. She needed the rhythm of it, the way the city revealed itself one careful step at a time. She needed the feeling of earning her day. They ate together without filling the air with too many words. A spoon tapped a bowl. A truck coughed awake on the street and settled into a steady, idle bidoo-hoot. The sound pulled last night into the room as if someone had opened a door to it. The cafeteria. Kyle's smile sharpened for witnesses. The word that landed like a slap. Brianna's tray rattling. the promise in Kyle's backward glance, the kind that did not need language. The memory lived in her body more than in her mind. It tightened her shoulders, then loosened when she breathed. Janet studied her the way mothers do when they already know a shape of truth and are waiting to be invited to carry a corner of it. "You seem far away," she said, gentle as the steam lifting off the oatmeal. Riley lifted one shoulder and let it fall. "School things," she said. "The heavy kind, or the ordinary kind?" Riley looked at the swirl her spoon had made in the bowl. "Heavy for a moment," she said. "It passed." Janet nodded, letting the silence turn into permission rather than pressure. "If you want to tell me more later," she said, "we can walk the long way to the car after my shift." "The air helps," Riley murmured thanks. The way her mother offered time without requirement steadied her more than advice ever could. A magnet shaped like a mountain goat held a crayon drawing on the fridge. Stick figures on motorcycles under an enormous sun. The letters were careful and uneven. "You are brave." The colors never seemed to fade. The paper watched over every morning like a small, stubborn lighthouse. Her backpack lay open on the chair. Books weighted like stacked bricks, heavy and obedient. She slid her English notebook into the front pocket and still tucked behind the seam. Where nylon met zipper, a small rectangle of card rested like a secret that had chosen a quiet place to live. She had slipped it there on a different day, when her hands had needed a small task to steady themselves. She drew the card part way out, enough to see the tidy black letters of a name and the simple line of a number. She touched the card with the tip of her finger and left it there, letting the corner warm under her skin. He did not know it yet, but the crying biker she had helped would ride for her. The thought did not arrive as a proclamation. It slid in with the smell of cinnamon and the sound of the heater, quiet and inevitable. She did not say it out loud. She did not need to. It belonged to the private country inside her, where decisions were born and patience lived. She finished her oatmeal, rinsed the bowl, and set it in the rack, with the care of someone who understands that order is a kind of kindness. Janet began packing a lunch with quick hands and a small knife that clicked carefully against the cutting board. They salted the sidewalks after midnight, her mother said, as if this were simply weather and not love. "Watch the curbs. Ice likes to pretend it is concrete." Riley smiled. "I will." She pulled on her brother's old jacket. The corduroy collar scratched her neck in a way that felt familiar. She checked the seal of her sleeve once more and stood, shifting weight to test the fit. The leg answered with that quiet click she trusted. Everything felt secure. Sage texted again. Outside. Riley slung the backpack over one shoulder and leaned to kiss her mother's cheek. Janet's palm brushed her sleeve in a touch that said, "Be careful," without saying it. Cold met Riley at the door like a wall that expected to be climbed. The street looked dusted with flour. The air tasted like coin. Sage stamped one boot, then the other, grinning into a scarf wound high over her mouth. "You look like you slept," Sage said. "I did not," Riley answered, "but I am willing to pretend." They fell into their usual pace. Boots crunched. The town woke itself in small noises. A man in a red hat shoveled his walk with the patience of a person who has made peace with repetition. A dog barked twice behind a fence, and then remembered that mornings were for dignity. Overhead, the sky wore the same washed gray as the cafeteria lights. But out here it felt like weather rather than confinement. "Rumors already mutating," Sage said, breath making little ghosts that evaporated quickly. "I heard you put him through a table. I also heard you wept with righteous fury." Riley snorted. "Nice to know. My legend refuses to be boring." "It will be useful, though," Sage said. "Maybe boredom kept people quiet yesterday. Maybe spectacle keeps them loud enough to intervene next time." They passed the gas station. "Mr. Chen looked up from behind the counter and lifted his chin. 2 fingers tapped the glass. A small salute. Riley raised her gloved hand in return. She did not know whether he had heard about the cafeteria. The gesture landed anyway, exactly where she needed it. They let the conversation loosen. A poem due about sound and silence. The chemistry teacher, who loved the word stoichiometry, as if he were trying to teach the class to dance with it. The coffee at the community center that tasted like bark and kept veterans talking when the cold would otherwise send them home too early. Their talk braided around the quiet between them and made a path both could walk without watching their feet. Skyview rose from the snow in a confusion of wings and additions. Inside, the air thickened with coats and voices and the restless warmth of machines. Lockers slammed. An announcement crackled with the strange cheer of official voices that refused to admit any day could be bad. Riley moved through it as participant and witness at once. Eyes slid toward her and away, toward her leg and away, unsure where to settle. She did not hold it against anyone. She had learned the difference between malice and not knowing what to do with your hands. In first period English, the teacher asked for a paragraph on a minor symbol. Riley picked windows. She wrote about how you could see through them and also see yourself, and how the mistake came when you thought reflection was view. The pencil's scratch felt like a saw's clean work through soft wood. Between classes, Brianna appeared near the water fountain. The red had drained from her eyes. Her shoulders rode higher on her frame, by the thickness of a folded paper maybe, but higher. "I wanted to say thank you," she said. "You do not have to," Riley said, "but I am glad you did. My mom said you should not have to fix what other people break," Brianna said. "She also said dinner is on us whenever you come. Tell her she does not owe me," Riley said, "and also tell her I plan to order more than is reasonable." Brianna laughed, brief and honest, and squeezed Riley's forearm before the stream of students carried her away. By lunch, fatigue threaded itself across the muscles along Riley's back. Adrenaline had come in hot the day before, and now charged a fee. She ate at the edge of the room with the window light at her back, her sandwich tasting mostly like effort and patience. Kyle was not in sight. Relief spread thinly over her food like a napkin that could not quite cover everything. Sage arrived and set a single grape in the middle of the table with the solemnity of a wager. They traded class reports, small jokes, the kind you could say without drawing a circle of listeners. A boy from the soccer team tried a laugh too loud and glanced around to see if it had landed. Life continued its practiced indifference. When the last bell released them, the sky had tightened to a colder blue. Wind moved straighter, the kind that did not negotiate with your face. They walked the same route home with fewer words. Riley could feel the seam in the day opening ahead of them, that place where afternoon tips toward evening, and people remember to be kinder because the dark asks it of them. At the corner, Sage turned toward her street and made their small ritual, 2 fingers to her eyes, then to Riley. "I see you. You see me." Riley repeated it, and they both smiled because it was good to keep something even when the weather tried to take other things away. Riley reached Veterans Park as the light thinned to silver. The memorial stones were brushed clean today. Someone had done that work with care and no wish for credit. The names looked sharp again, each letter a small doorway to a life she did not know. Flags whispered above her in a stiff voice. A minivan idled near the exit, exhaust pooling low and white as breath over cold water. Then a motorcycle rolled past on the street beyond. Not fast, not loud, a measured passage through winter. The sound wrapped itself around her ribs and held there, The way a true chord hangs in the throat after the note is gone. Memory arrived as sensation more than picture. Chrome under a pale sky. Leather creaking. A man whose grief had cracked his face open. The question she had asked because she could do nothing else, "Are you all right?" The world had paused there. A long, clean pause that made space for a better answer. The engine faded. A crow spoke from the cottonwoods, and then considered the matter solved. Riley let Kiet settle. It felt like the beginning of a decision being made somewhere she could not yet see. Home waited with its familiar light. Inside, the kitchen glowed the forgiving gold of late afternoon. Janet's keys sat near the fruit bowl. A note in her neat block letters lay beside them. Work called me in early. Chili on the stove. Wood stacked. Call me if you need me to come home. Riley touched the note with one finger, as if to answer it, and set her backpack down. She loosened the sleeve seal and rubbed warmth back into the skin just above the socket, until the ache stepped down a rung. She ladled chili into a bowl with a hairline crack that traveled from rim to base. They had agreed to ignore the flaw together. The bowl held. That felt like a lesson. Upstairs, homework split itself into two piles, the kind she understood, and the kind that pretended it could not be understood. She worked through the friendly pile first. The pencil made a soft, steady sound. The house moaned as the temperature dropped and settled into its night posture. Her phone buzzed. Sage again. Golden harvest this weekend. Bring people. Riley typed, "Yes." The word felt like a tent stake, driven into the ground of the next days. A plan is a kindness you give your future self. She smiled at the thought, and realized it could be true, even when you had to make it true every time. She showered. The hot water beat the tightness out of her shoulders, and drew a pink edge around the place that hurt near her knee. She dressed in an old sweatshirt that smelled faintly of oranges and clean cotton, and sat on the bed with a towel draped over her hair. She slid the card a little further from its seam in the backpack and read the name again. It felt steady on the paper. She did not dial. Not tonight. A promise can live without a call. When both sides already know its shape. Outside, the wind lifted and set itself down. Somewhere down the block, a door thudded, reconsidered itself, and thudded again. She turned out the light and lay back. The room cooled. Frost began writing its quiet math across the window's edge. In the dark, she could trace the line where her body ended and her will began, and feel no need to apologize for either. The city kept moving beyond her walls. Somewhere engines idled. Somewhere a man who had cried in a park gripped the handlebars of his life and chose not to let go. The world kept the ordinary tempo of survival. In the space just before sleep, something in her aligned with something out there, like two notes, finding harmony across a room. If you listened closely, you could almost hear it. Not prophecy, not thunder, just a low, patient hum. Waiting. Morning arrived quieter than the last. A gentler cold that polished the windows instead of biting them. Riley woke with the sense of having already begun, as if the night had been a corridor she had crossed without remembering each step. The house breathed its steady winter breath in the vents. She warmed the liner between both hands, settled the socket, and sealed the sleeve with calm care. A small ceremony of control before the day asked anything at all of her. Downstairs, a note from her mother leaned by the sink in neat block letters. Work called early and wood stacked, and text me if you need me to come home. The handwriting made its own kind of heat. Riley slid the card back into the hidden seam of her backpack, with a touch that could have been habit or prayer, and stepped into the morning. The walk with Sage found its old rhythm. Boots cracked the thin crust of frost. A mail truck glided by with the cautious grace of a large animal that did not want to spook the day. Their talk braided around silence and needed no explanation. One glance and the soft tilt of a smile could carry more weight than a speech. Skyview swallowed them in a yawn of doors and a puff of heated air that smelled like wet wool and pencil shavings. Lockers sang their metal complaints. The intercom cleared its throat and delivered assurances in a voice that did not believe in mistakes. Riley kept to the edges of the hall, following the muscle memory of that path. She tracked surfaces and transitions, where tile gave way to mat, where a lip in the floor might catch a foot if you were not watching. Awareness was not fear. It was the price of moving through a world designed for other bodies. By the time lunch neared, the morning had sanded the sharper edges off her thoughts. She had earned a brief nod for a paragraph on a poem that resisted being known. She had begun a short list for later, tasks braided with intentions, another way of telling herself that action was possible and would not require permission. The cafeteria door opened onto the familiar humid noise. Heat lifted from under the serving lamps, making a wavy mirage of air above the metal trays. The line coiled along the wall, a restless river of trays and chatter. Far off, the register beeped with the metronome stubbornness of a machine that would outlast them all. The room smelled of salt and sweet, trying hard to be dessert. Riley and Sage joined the flow. Trays slid forward, with a sound like distant surf. The sneeze guard cast a faint, rippled reflection of Riley's jaw, and the suggestion of blue lightning hidden under denim. Ahead, Brianna stood alone with shoulders squared to a measured angle, as if she had chosen her posture in a mirror and refused to change it. When she noticed Riley, the set of her mouth eased. Behind them, a voice skimmed across a table, smooth and sharp as a coin. "Here comes the rescue team." Riley did not turn. Turning would give more than she wanted to give. The line advanced half a step. Steam sighed against glass. A ladle touched steel with a small, patient clink. Kyle's reflection arrived before the rest of him, a smear at the edge of the sneeze guard. He slid sideways into the line, a swimmer changing lanes through water that somehow opened for him. Two boys followed, eyes careful not to meet others. Their trays knocked the backs of other trays and did not apologize. A lunch aide looked up, then down again, adding the cost of intervention to the thin balance of her noon hour. Sage's voice stayed soft and dry. "You are not cutting in front of Brianna." Kyle craned his neck as if Sage were a post to look around. He looked Riley straight in the face, then let his gaze drop to her leg, as if he had saved a punchline for the end. "Make way for priority boarding," he said. "Some assemblies take longer." The boys tittered and went quiet when he did not join them. Heat rose across Riley's collarbone. Her fingers tightened on the tray until the plastic flexed in a shallow curve. She set it softly on the metal rail, a clear sound of decision. The cashier glanced up as if a signal had been sent. "You are out of place," Riley said, and kept her voice level. "Line starts there." Kyle lifted his eyebrows and performed a smile for the audience that had formed of its own accord. It was the kind of smile that offered a free ticket to belonging if you accepted the rules that came with it. "Half a person, whole a problem," he said. "Step back." "Club." The word found its mark again, but this time it struck scar, not fresh skin. Riley did not move. A tray behind her bumped her elbow. She caught it steady with a small apology to its owner and kept her hand there, braced on someone else's meal, as if she could keep their food from sliding off the day. Brianna stared at the green beans and held her milk carton like it might be enough if nothing else could be. She said nothing, which was also a choice. Sage inhaled like a diver about to meet cold water. "Leave her alone," she said, even as she looked to the lunch aide. without flinching. "Could you please ask him to move to the end of the line?" He cut in front of 3 people. The lunch aide had the steady eyes of someone who had practiced patience longer than most careers last. She drew one breath and let it out with her decision. "End of the line," she said to Kyle. Her voice had a trestle in it that made it carry, "Now." Kyle turned the smile on her. The smile did not work on her. The cashier lifted a hand and waggled 2 fingers, a small signal that said, "I am watching, and I am not alone." Mr. Patterson stood by the far door with a clipboard, counting the way people count to keep buildings from floating off, and looked up like a hawk roused from a fence. Kyle's swagger bent and righted itself, a mast in a gust that refuses to break. He leaned toward Riley as he pivoted past, close enough for scent to become message, winter mint gum, and a clean note of shampoo, then a sharper smell underneath, something like resentment already burning in a small blue flame. "This is not finished," he said softly, "only for her." He rearranged his retreat into a performance, turned obedience into choice. His friends followed, whispering loudly. The current of the room released a breath. It did not know it held, and pretended not to notice itself doing so. Sage let out a thin stream of air and did not look proud of it. Brianna stayed still. Riley's palm on the metal rail felt the rumor of warmth under the steel. The line inched again in little lurches. When Brianna reached the register, Riley touched her elbow. "Go on," she whispered. "I have the rest." The cashier took coins and gave back change, and slid a receipt forward with a small smile that meant, "I see you when words could not." They found a table by the windows. Sound poured around them without insisting on their attention. The glass threw cool light on their faces and gave them a thin shelter from the heat of the lamps. Brianna sat with her back to the room, a strategic choice she did not announce. "Food tastes better when you do not earn it with a fight," Sage said, then made herself eat anyway. Riley's hands were steady now. The tremble had left the wire. Bread tasted like air and habit. So she chewed, as if flavor were a skill a person could learn by practice. Across the room, Kyle sat with his friends and pretended to forget them. Every so often he laughed too loudly and scanned faces to see if the laugh had landed. The sound bounced off the tile and came back thinner than before. "You okay?" Riley asked Brianna, without turning her care into assignment. "Better with my back to the room," Brianna said. "He does not like it when he cannot see the face of the person he is trying to impress." Sage cracked a grin. "We will keep that in the manual." Riley tasted the word manual and liked the taste of it. She let the room ebb and flow. The aftertaste of adrenaline slid out of the hinge of her jaw. The tender ring under the sleeve made its case, and then yielded when she shifted her weight a fraction. The small adjust returned the world to possible. "We are going to your family's restaurant this weekend," Sage said, as if she were reading the weather, not making new weather. "We will bring people. We will overtip until it becomes a cautionary tale." Brianna ducked her head and smiled into her milk. "My mother will try to refuse," she said. "Do not let her." "We will not," Riley said. "Also, I want to try the sesame noodles that make Mr. Chen at the gas station smile. Just thinking about them." They ate. They told small jokes because small jokes fortify the parts that larger speeches cannot reach. Sage opened her notes app and gave the plan a stub of a spine. Riley counted names on one hand, the kind of people who knew the difference between being noisy and being present. It was enough to begin. It was more than yesterday had. The bell sounded and the room unspooled into hallways. Trays rattled into bins. The register beeped a last little pattern that might have been a sigh if machines were allowed to sigh. Mr. Patterson's clipboard scratched a line in a column. Duty performed and filed in the unloved archive that keeps schools alive. As Riley stood, Kyle drifted by as if geometry, not will, had laid the route under his feet. His shoulder brushed hers faintly, the exact pressure an accident would make. He did not look at her. He wore a smile for someone who was not there to see it. The words he did not speak arrived anyway, and made themselves understood. In the hall the lights hummed. Old bees in long tubes. The bleach smell was sharper near the threshold, where someone had already cleaned a spill no one would remember. Riley walked with Sage on one side and Brianna on the other for the length of a breath. Then the stream of bodies divided them, a small flock splitting to fly around a pole and rejoining in some later sky. Afternoon settled into its compartments. In an art room that smelled of dust and graphite, Riley wrote a paragraph about negative space and how what you name empty often carries the weight you are afraid to draw. In a classroom that worshipped numbers, a problem set spoke a language she did not yet know. Later, she would let Sage translate with a grin and a complaint. The intercom clicked to life once, asked for calm in a voice that lived on requests for calm, and calm arrived because everyone was tired of its opposite. Between classes, she paused at the trophy case, where plaques from past teams sat under a soft fur of dust. The top shelf had given itself to forgetting. The middle shelves remained clean because they lived at eye level, and people believed in what they could see without effort. Her reflection looked back in the glass, the turned-up collar against an imagined wind, the faint smudge of blue lightning below. She did not find fear in that mirror. She found focus and a patience that did not ask for permission. Her fingers found the napkin from yesterday in her pocket, its corner carefully folded over a stain. She did not know why she kept it. Maybe because keeping small things is practice for keeping larger ones. When the last bell let the stampede loose, the sky had begun to pull color and put it away. Blue tucked itself into gray. Snow took on the soft look that hides how hard it can be. Near the loading dock, where the wind made an alley of air that smelled of gasoline and metal, Riley heard the far-off thrum of a motorcycle. It was not near. It did not belong to this building. It moved along its own road at its own speed. The sound did not promise rescue. It did not need to. It placed a hand on the day and held it steady for one more breath. At the curb, Sage's brother rolled up with the persistence of a truck that wanted a nap. Sage leaned across the open window. "Text me when you get home," she said, ritual and grin in place. Riley saluted with 2 fingers. Sage mirrored the salute as the truck pulled away. Riley started home on foot, the sidewalk offering a series of decisions, and the air so clear it felt brittle in her mouth. Behind her, the school finished swallowing its noise. Ahead, the park waited with its quiet stones and whispering flags. She would pass and not stop today. Faith does not require daily proof when the proof is already a way of seeing. As she crossed the street, she noticed how the snow took footprints and held them for a while, then let them go. She thought of trays, steadied for strangers, of a lunch aide who spent a little more of herself when she did not have much to spend, of a small white card warming under a fingertip, of a promise that did not announce itself but stood anyway. Wind twined through the cottonwoods. Farther off, an engine rolled past and faded, a chord that would not resolve yet. Riley lifted her chin into the cold, found her balance in the ordinary way, and kept moving. The afternoon loosened its grip the way cold cloth warms in patient hands. After the last bell, the building exhaled its noise into the parking lot and was quiet again. Riley chose the long route without naming it, a small turn at the corner that brought her to the path skirting Veterans Park. The cottonwoods stood bare and tall, chandeliers of gray limb. Flags along the memorial whispered a dry song. Snow slumped along the curb and showed seams where cars had stitched through earlier. Her prosthetic clicked on the shoveled strip, a steady metronome she trusted. The tender ring above the socket had settled to a dull ache, the kind filed under ordinary. Breath made small ghosts. Under the quiet, some other sound waited. The memory of an engine, like a heartbeat, she could not unhear. The motorcycle appeared before she was ready for it. It idled under the cottonwoods, dark and heavy, chrome catching the thin light and throwing it back as a tired glimmer. Leather saddlebags sagged like old bellows. The air around it smelled of cold metal and faint, sweet exhaust, turning to frost. A man slumped over the bars, shoulders heaving once, then again, making a sound that did not belong to public space. Her steps slowed. The practical part of her mapped exits without being asked. Street to the left, open lawn to the right, memorial stones at her back. She listened. No voices, no footsteps, only the steady rumble and a leaf shiver that pretended to be sound. She could have kept walking. Safe choices always argued first and sounded reasonable. Do not bring more into your life than you can carry. Keep moving. But the other part of her, the part that had stood at the cafeteria window and chosen to be seen, lifted her chin and took one more step, and then one more. She made her boots loud on the gravel so she would not arrive like a shadow. She stopped far enough not to crowd him and let the engine's low purr fill the space. Her voice had not yet taken. "Are you all right?" she asked, and let the question be plain. His head snapped up. Grief had sanded a handsome face raw, eyes rimmed in red, beard scattered with gray. Weather and work had left their lines. A leather vest lay over a flannel shirt, patches stitched tight as a timeline. One patch she recognized the way a person recognizes a famous shape glimpsed from a moving car, and cannot quite believe is real in front of them. "Go away, kid," he said, voice scraped thin. "Not a good time. I can," she answered. "I did not want to pass by if you needed someone to stand here a minute." He blinked, suspicion and confusion changing places. The engine hummed. Flags whispered. A crow rode a black arc across the pale sky and vanished. "My brother died," he said, the words flat as a dropped wrench. "Call came an hour ago. Heart." He was not old. He wiped his face with the heel of his hand, as if grief were a stain you could sand off. "We were supposed to ride in the spring. We kept talking about it. Talking does not move a bike." "I am sorry," she said, and let the cold sting inside her nose unchallenged. There was nothing useful to say to the fact of death. The best you could do was widen the air around it so the words could breathe. "You should get home," he said. "It is getting colder. Your mom will worry." "She is at work," Riley said. "She will worry anyway. She trusts me to know what I am doing." His gaze traveled down without permission, the way people catalog when they do not realize they are doing it. His eyes stopped where denim met the carbon sheen of her leg, where the cuff had lifted with the tilt of her stance. He looked up. The question hung without words. "Car accident," she said, answering what he had not asked. "A while back, it was bad, and then it was less bad. It belongs to me now." He nodded like she had named a country he had once served in. He thumbed the kill switch. The engine fell quiet, leaving a ringing afterfeel the way a church holds air after the last organ note. He swung a leg over, stood, and seemed larger now, not taller but more present. Tattoos scrolled his forearm. A white half-moon nick on one knuckle told a small story of fists or work or both. "Name is Wade," he said. "Wade Sullivan." Riley Matthews. He filed the name the way a person sets a tool in the right drawer. He barked a laugh that was more breath than joke and shook his head. "You are a brave kid," Riley Matthews, approaching a crying biker in a nearly empty park. "I am a kid with a problematic savior complex," she said. "That is my friend's diagnosis." This time his laugh found itself. He leaned against the seat and let the leather hold him. Quiet moved in around them. A car passed on the street, tires whispering on salt. "What was his name?" she asked. "Gentle." "Your brother, Marcus," he said, and the name softened his mouth. Marcus Sullivan. Construction. 3 kids. A wife who could run a small country if anyone would ask her to. He loved old westerns and made coffee you could stand a spoon in. He saved for a road trip and kept not taking it. That part keeps burning. They stood with that, strangers linked by a line of care that hummed between them. Silence sat at their small table and no one rushed it out the door. Wade looked her over again, not unkind now, only curious. "Does it hurt?" he asked, nodding at her leg. "Or do you get used to it?" "Yes," she said. "Both. Sometimes the brain calls a number that is no longer there. It is strange and it is manageable. I try not to hide it. It belongs to me." "Good," he said. "That is good." Snow began again, small dry grains that made barely a sound when they met the world. The cottonwoods creaked, the sky thinned to a color like ice over dark water. "I should go," he said softly, and the space around him grew heavier with the truth of it. "I have to tell his wife. Her name is Donna. The kids will be home soon. I did not want to carry this through their door. But there is no other door. There is no right way," Riley said. "Only the true way." He took that in like a person grips a railing for the turn. He reached into his vest and brought out a small leather wallet. From it he drew a plain white card, letters and numbers stamped clean and centered. He held it out a little awkwardly, as if this script were new to him. "In case you ever need help," he said, "or just want to know where to find coffee that wakes the dead. Wade Sullivan. That is a real number." She accepted it. The paper was cool and stiff. She did not slide it into a loose pocket to be laundered by accident. She unzipped the backpack, found the narrow seam she had claimed as private storage, and eased the card in until its corner caught. A place chosen on purpose is stronger than a place chosen by chance. "Thank you," she said, "for trusting me with a way to find you." "You trusted me first," he said, a flash of humor and respect. Sharing the same look, he fastened his helmet strap with the economy of long habit and swung onto the bike. He did not start it yet. He looked at her with visor up, eyes bare. "Kid," he said, "if anyone gives you trouble, you call. I know some people who understand how to stand quietly in a place until the air changes. I do not need an army," she said, "but it is good to know one exists. Sometimes knowing is enough," he said. "Sometimes it is not." He thumbed the switch. The engine woke into the cold like a living thing. The sound thickened the air. He let it idle a breath, then nodded. A small tilt any language would translate as thanks. "Safe ride," she said. "Safe walk," he returned, and rolled out from under the trees with patience that did not need to prove itself. Snow took the tire tracks and turned them into handwriting that would be read and then erased. She stood until the sound thinned and was gone. Quiet settled back like a blanket shaken once and smooth. She looked at her boot prints, stitched into the sugared crust. She felt the slight shift where she had rocked on the carbon foot while fitting a sentence into place. The card lay warm now in the backpack seam, a small anchor in a bag full of books. She set her palm there for a second, a habit that might someday look like superstition but, for now, was only the body confirming its own story. She crossed the lot and stepped onto the sidewalk again. The memorial stones kept their watch without asking to be admired. Names carved clean looked at the living and did not argue with time. Flags whispered. A raven called once and then decided the matter was settled. By the time she turned onto her street, porch lights were winking on. Kitchen windows glowed the color of soup. Somewhere, a television laughed too loudly. Inside her own kitchen, a note would be waiting. The chili would have grown a skin to be stirred back. The bowl with the hairline crack would still hold. Upstairs, her window would be gathering frost at its edges. The house would let her keep quiet. Until words were ready, she did not hurry toward that kindness. She walked at a pace that honored the fact that she had stopped and stood long enough to matter. Far off, behind her, an engine eased into distance, not a rescue, not a threat, just a new line drawn between two people under a winter sky. It would hold, it would thicken, it would ask more of both of them than either could name tonight. She pressed her palm to the door as if greeting a forehead. Wood gave back a little heat. Inside, she undid the seal at her knee with practiced patience and rubbed warmth into skin that had done its job. On the fridge, the crayon sun over two motorcycles brightened in the early dark. "You are brave," the letters said. She did not argue tonight. Morning opened with a pale shine and the kind of cold that sharpened every sound. Riley woke already moving, as if sleep had been a corridor rather than a wall. She warmed the liner between both hands, settled the socket, and sealed the sleeve with measured care. When the seal hushed against skin, she breathed and stood, the small ritual making the day hold still. Downstairs, the kitchen ran its gentle weather. Oatmeal fogged the window. The radio listed slick intersections in a recipe voice that never sounded alarmed. Janet had left a folded note angled just so, as if neat corners might persuade winter to behave. Work called early. Text after last period. Be careful of the north steps. Riley ate. Rinsed the bowl. Dried it with the soft cloth that lived on the oven handle. Before shouldering the backpack, she touched the hidden seam where a plain card rested. Note superstition. Only a quiet check that the story had not misplaced itself overnight. Outside, the world wore the color of pressed tin. Sage met her at the end of the block with a scarf pulled high, breath ghosting the knit. They fell into step. Their talk hopped lightly from homework to Brianna, to the rumor that the vending machine had finally surrendered to a determined student. The cold served as punctuation, keeping sentences short and precise. Skyview breathed them in, warm and wool-scented. Lockers clanged their particular music. The intercom cleared its throat and pretended it had never heard bad news. Classes slid past with the comfort of known edges. In English, Riley wrote about how silence can be an act, not a lack. In science, she copied the bones of an equation and trusted Sage to lend it muscle later. At lunch, they kept the window table. The glass felt cooler than the room, and that helped. Brianna arrived with her milk and the trying smile of someone testing hope to see if it fits. They ate quickly. The noise rose and fell like wind in vent. Across the room, Kyle performed laughter that worked better on tile than on people. His eyes moved like a fisherman's hand, waiting for a tug. When the bell sent the cafeteria spilling into hallways, the room exhaled. Trays clattered. The register sang its small last pattern. Mr. Patterson's clipboard scratched a line that would never be famous and would still keep the building alive. The afternoon had a river's patience, a quiz that asked for honesty more than facts, a video about forces that behaved the same whether or not you believed in them. Boots dried by the heater row, leaving damp crescents on rubber mats. Then the final bell, its usual stampede softened by cold. Zippers tugged. Hats were pulled down. Doors breathed out students into air that bit like mint. Riley stepped into it and felt the difference before she named it. The rumble began as rumor underneath idling buses and coughing sedans. It did not arrive all at once. It gathered itself in patient layers the way weather approaches, choosing to be undeniable rather than loud. A sound built for distance found the edge of the lot and held there. Heads turned first, then faces followed. Sage glanced at Riley. That your storm, maybe, Riley said, and cleared a throat that had nothing stuck in it but feeling. They came from the North Road, a small procession, not many and exactly enough, bikes in dark ranks, chrome catching winter light in quick, cold flares, helmets black as river stones, vests patched with stories. At the front he was there, Wade, his posture steady, his gaze searching until it found her. A simple fact in a busy field. Engines eased down and idled. The sound-filled spaces Riley had not known were empty. Teachers paused with hands on door handles. A few students lifted phones, but no one shouted. The quiet that followed was not fear, it was the kind of hush rooms make when something true walks through them and does not need to explain itself. Wade slid his bike along the curb and set it gentle. The others arranged themselves with surprising grace, a moving hinge that made room without apology. Warm metal and faint fuel braided with the clean sting of snow. He took off his helmet, and the afternoon grew lighter by a degree. Grief still lived in the lines of his face, steadier ground beneath them now. He crossed the small distance like a man walking a familiar path. Riley waited long enough to let choice be real, then stepped forward. Wade stopped with the respect a school demands around its children. He raised a hand. She answered with the same small lift, a greeting learned at distance. "Afternoon, kid," he said. "Afternoon," she answered, sage, irrepressible. Even when breath crystallized, leaned toward Riley. "This is either the best idea or a complicated one." Wade's nod included thanks and warning in equal measure. "We keep it quiet," he said. "We are not here to scare anyone. We are here to walk a person home." Mr. Patterson arrived carrying caution and curiosity like matched books, clipboard tucked against his chest, eyes doing the math that includes people and policy and the weather. He looked at Riley, then at Wade, then at the line of bikes that seemed to have grown from the school's foundation. "Everything all right?" he asked. Riley spoke before anyone else could draft her sentence. "He is a friend of my family," she said, steady and simple. "They offered to make sure I get home safe today." Wade added with a shrug that let air out of the moment, "Roads are slick. People are worse when roads are slick." Patterson weighed insistence against allowance and chose wisely. "Keep the entrance clear," he said. "No revving on school grounds." Wade looked back once. Nods traveled down the row faster than words. Engines stayed soft. Boots found places that did not block anything. Kyle drifted within range, not too close, close enough that his expression tried on boredom and could not keep it. A laugh started and failed to find a face. He folded his arms and watched. He did not smile. Sage stood very still, which meant her mind was sprinting. "Do you want this?" she asked, quiet, so the choice could fit inside the question. Riley looked at Wade. She looked at the bikes, at the doorway where Mr. Patterson stood like a passport. The morning's ritual still lived on her skin. The card's corner made a warm point under canvas. "Yes," she said, but slow, no show. "Just the thing itself." Wade's grin was small and real. "Just the thing itself," he echoed, as if he had been waiting for someone to set that rule out loud. They moved. Riley stepped from the curb. Wade matched her on foot, a man walking beside a girl through winter. Two bikes glided to her left and right, idling at a careful pace, leaving her a measure of quiet in their wake. The others fell in behind at thoughtful distance. Not a parade, more like a prayer with engines. Students at the windows stopped pretending they were not watching. Some waved, some filmed. A teacher touched her own throat, and then let her hand fall. Embarrassed by how visible feeling can be, Brianna slipped through the door. lifted her milk carton like a toast to courage, then hugged it close as if it could warm her hand. Sage kept pace at Riley's other side, boots crunching, scarf hiding a grin she could not quite smother. "I will never again say your life is boring," she murmured without moving her mouth much. Riley smiled and did not deny it. They took the path along the fence and out to the street. Engines rose like a low choir and settled again. Cars paused without honking. A bus driver lifted 2 fingers off the wheel in a ghost of a salute. Snow squeaked. A raven called once, a hinge remembering its sound. At the corner, Wade mounted the bike and let it idle at walking speed. A patient animal pacing a companion. He did not look for cameras. He did not look for Kyle. He watched the road in front of Riley, as if the block belonged to both of them until it was done. They turned toward her neighborhood. The town adjusted, as towns do when enough people insist on a shape. Mrs. Delgado stood on her porch with her coat open, and her mouth a little open too. The mailman paused, and then continued as if he had always scheduled himself to witness this exact thing. A dog barked and reconsidered. Riley's body took notes her mind would keep for later. The rightmost headlight flickering over packed snow in a rhythm that matched her step. Exhaust twining with cold into a pale ribbon. Wade riding a fraction behind where he could adjust for whatever might arrive without warning. The ache beneath the sleeve woke under attention. She shifted weight, precise and small. A correction that would look like grace if filmed from the right angle. The ache stepped down. The day stayed possible. "You good?" Wade asked, pitched for her and the machine. "Good," she said. "Thank you." "Do not thank me yet," he said. "We are only getting started." They reached her street. The line of bikes opened a little and then tightened again. Not a trick, just the natural inhale and exhale of bodies moving together. Janet's car was not in the driveway. The porch light had not yet remembered to click on. The house looked more like itself for being approached this way. Wade cut the engine first. The others followed until quiet settled in thin layers on the snow. He swung off and walked with Riley to the bottom step, stopping as if an invisible border marked family ground. "Thank you," she said. The words were small and exact. He shook his head. "You stopped in a park when you did not have to." He said, "This is interest on that loan." Riley let the line fit inside her and stay. She reached to the backpack seam and touched the card. Not a flourish, only a check. Still there. A small anchor in a bag full of books. Sage bumped her shoulder with a mitten, a soft punctuation. "I will text your mom so she does not faint," she said, already tapping. From up the block came the sound of a car easing into the neighborhood. Kyle's old sedan, muffler complaining. He drove past without looking directly at her. His jaw was set in a way that promised effort pointed somewhere. A laugh moved and died in his throat when he registered the row of bikes. He kept going. The world did not clap. Wade saw him and said nothing. He did not need to. He adjusted his weight on his heels and let his hands relax. Open. Empty. People who mistake calm for weakness rarely finish the math. "We will leave it here," Wade said to Riley. "No cameras from us. No noisy. Just this." "Just this," she repeated, and felt the words catch on a hook inside and hold. He nodded to his people. Engines started one by one, staggered and low. Visors lowered. Gloves lifted. The line peeled away in pairs, not fast and not slow, exactly right. Wade was last. He looked at her once more, a look that said more than mouths could in cold air. Then he rode. Tail light. A small ember moving down the street. Riley waited on the step until the sound folded back into wind. The porch light flicked on late, sensing motion it could not categorize. Inside, warmth caught in her throat. The folded note by the sink still leaned in its careful angle. She drew a new line below it with her fingertip. Home safe. Will call. She drank water and set the glass exactly on the pale ring left by the last one. Her shoulders let go of what they had been carrying since the first rumble. Upstairs, she unlaced her boot at a pace that refused to rush the good part. She freed the seal, peeled the sleeve, rubbed warmth into skin above the socket until pink returned. Relief came ordinary and clean. Her palm rested on the backpack seam and stayed there a moment. The card warmed under canvas. Her phone buzzed. Sage. You are officially escorted. Also, Mrs. Delgado demands a full report. Riley wrote back that it had been a very quiet parade, then added a small line that was not a secret, only a fact. He kept pace like he has done this before. He had, with grief, with roads, with other people's lives. She set the phone aside and looked toward the kitchen, where the crayon sun over the motorcycles shone stubborn and bright. You are brave, the letters said. The sentence did not feel heavy tonight. It felt like a clean coat, left to dry on a sturdy hook. Outside, the neighborhood folded itself into evening. Somewhere a motorcycle turned onto another street and moved away, steady as a promise. Somewhere a boy rehearsed a smile that would not fit the thing he was planning. Somewhere a gym teacher filled another line on a clipboard and thought about soup. Riley lay back and let her breath find the low, steady balance she trusted. The day clicked into place. The moment at the curb, the pace of engines, the hush that fell when the world recognized a thing that did not need a speech, not a show, just the thing itself. Tomorrow would ask for more. For now, the hum was enough. Morning wore the soft blue of porcelain and held a careful quiet. Riley woke with the sense that the day had already begun moving somewhere beyond the window. She warmed the liner between both hands, the way you warm a small animal, settled the socket, and sealed the sleeve with deliberate care. The gentle hush of the seal steadied her. She stood, tested weight, and felt the small give and answer. That meant the fit was good. Downstairs the house smelled of toast and the clean edge of coffee. Janet stood at the counter repacking a bag as if straight lines might persuade the hours to behave. She looked up and read Riley's face with the practiced speed of a parent. The look said they could still change their minds and also said they both knew they would not. You sure? Janet asked. Yes, Riley said. Then, because truth settles better when spoken twice, she said yes again. They ate without filling the morning with extra words. The radio murmured weather and distant closures. Wind rubbed its shoulder against the eaves. When they were done, Riley rinsed her plate and wiped the inside rim until the glaze shone, a small act of order before stepping into someone else's grief. The drive east cut through neighborhoods that wore winter like a duty. Yards held the heavy shapes of toys gone quiet until spring. A dog trotted a precise line along a fence, serious with patrol. The heater pushed warm air at Riley's boots. She kept her backpack in her lap and felt, through canvas, the quiet square of a plain white card, a steady geometry under cloth. Sage texted as they turned onto a long street of single-story houses. Her message arrived with the kind of cheer that understands its place. You got this. If extraction is needed, send the avocado. Riley smiled and typed back one word. Good. The small timestamp under it worked like proof that someone else was awake with her inside this moment. They found the house with a pine cone wreath and a ribbon the color of cinnamon. A pickup and an old sedan sat nose to nose at the curb. Janet idled a breath, studying the porch light, the stillness, the way curtains hold themselves when rooms are holding their breath. Ready? She asked again. For form and kindness. Yes, Riley said, and opened the door. Cold met her in a clean rush. The front steps creaked in a way that made the house feel honest. Wade opened before their knuckles could complete a second knock. He looked tidied, but not disguised. Beard trimmed, eyes clearer, grief still written in the corners like a watermark. He took in Riley first, then Janet, and set his stance to courteous, "Thank you for coming," he said. "Please, come in." Warmth inside held more than temperature. Casserole dishes crowded every flat surface, each labeled with a strip of tape that turned generosity into logistics. Sympathy cards lined the mantel, their fronts stiff with lilies and doves. On the back of a few, return addresses stood in careful hands. As if the words needed coordinates to stand firm, the air carried a faint braid of lasagna and laundry and citrus cleaner, the scents people choose when trying to convince a home to feel orderly. Donna met them in the narrow hall, hair pulled back, sleeve pushed up, eyes red but steady. She shook Janet's hand first, and then Riley's, the grip firm, grateful, free of performative tremble. "Thank you," she said, not as pleasantry, but as ledger entry. "I am sorry for your loss," Janet said, and the simple sentence carried its full weight without decoration. Wade touched the doorframe with 2 fingers, a habit of people who have learned to mark thresholds. "Emma is in her room," he said to Riley. "She said yes to a visit, and then said maybe, and then said yes again." "That sounds like the right order." "May I?" Riley asked. "Go on." Donna said, "I will be in the kitchen. Take your time. If she asks me to come, I will. If she does not, I will not." They traded those lines like small procedural documents, boundary made visible and safe. Janet stayed with Donna in the kitchen, the low rise and fall of women who know how to stand next to one another without performing comfort. Wade led Riley down the hall. The carpet showed flattened tracks where different feet had carried last week into this one. At the end, a door stood half open, light filtering through with the muted quality of a winter afternoon. He tapped twice. "Gentle. Emma," he said. "Riley is here." "Okay," said a soft voice, unsteady but present. Stepping onto a new floor, Wade stepped back, palms open, and let Riley pass. The room wore the signs of a girl who had liked being seen until the world taught her to hide. Horse posters galloped across one wall, curling a little at the corners. A desk held a cloud-shaped lamp, and a neat row of colored pens, aligned as if someone had aligned them yesterday and again this morning and would align them after Riley left. On the bed, a hoodie swallowed a small frame. Emma looked up and tried a smile. It made it halfway. "Hi," Riley said. "Thank you for letting me come." "Hi," Emma said. Her eyes flicked to the prosthetic and then back to Riley's face and stayed, as if she had decided to look at the person first. "May I sit?" Riley asked. Emma gestured toward the chair. The gesture carried more ceremony than it needed, the way people add ceremony when they are trying to hold themselves together. Riley sat. The chair creaked its honest creak. Heat ticked through the register. Somewhere in the house, a timer beeped, and a quick hand silenced it. "I heard about your dad," Riley said. "I am sorry." Emma nodded and stared at the edge of the blanket as if reading a line printed there. "People say that a lot," she said. "I do not know what to do with it. I do not know where to put it." "You do not have to put it anywhere," Riley said. "You can let it sit on the bed for now." A small sound startled out of Emma, something like a laugh. If you squinted, "He was fine and then he was not," she said. "Everyone brings words that try to mean something. I do not like the words. I like the quiet more. Quiet is honest," Riley said. They let quiet have the room. It took space without crowding. Like a person who knows how to sit beside a hospital bed without filling the air with stories. Emma looked again at Riley's leg, and then at her face. "Does it hurt?" she asked. Quick, as if getting it out might control it. "Sometimes," Riley said. "Not always. Sometimes my brain calls a number that does not exist anymore." Phantom pain. It is a strange trick. It does not win forever. How do you walk through school while people look? Emma asked, words gathering now that they had permission. How do you not hear it all day? I do hear it, Riley said. I also listen for other things. The bell. My friend's double tap on my locker. The footfall that means someone is coming who needs to be seen. Listening does not make the noise vanish. It keeps it from being the only sound. Emma twisted the cuff of her sleeve. People at my school say things, she said, about my dad, about bikers. Like a joke, waiting at the end of a sentence, I used to laugh at jokes I did not like. So people would think I was normal. Now laughing feels like being a traitor to my own house. Riley let the words stand as they were. I am meeting you now, she said. I would like to be on your side, not on some joke side. Emma studied her as if measuring which part was surface and which part was structure. Are you scared? She asked. About the boy at your school, about people who say things, about the line of bikes that means one thing or another depending on the watcher. Yes, Riley said, and no. Fear is a moving animal. Sometimes it sits and you can walk past. Sometimes it stands in the doorway, and you need someone to stand with you until it remembers how to move. Is that what the bikes were? Emma asked. Someone to stand with you. Riley thought of chrome and exhaust, threading with breath. The windows, full of faces learning a new quiet. They were a way to say a thing without shouting it, she said. They were a yes. Not forever. Not for everything. Enough for a walk home. Emma nodded slowly, like that answer found a hook, and held. She reached into the nightstand and brought out a small notepad printed with stars. The counselor gave me this, she said, as if confessing to owning a tool she was not sure how to use. She wants me to write when I cannot speak. The pages are mostly blank. Writing is a way to set something down without losing it. Riley said, it can be a receipt for your own feelings. If you write the time and a word, it counts. A receipt, Emma repeated, trying the word like a coin. My friend and I keep tiny proofs. When the day makes us doubt what we saw, Riley said, a text, a photo of a clock, a name. It sounds silly until you need it, and then it is not silly at all. Emma looked toward the closet where a work jacket hung on the door. It was her father's, and even from here Riley could see the scuff on one cuff, the little patch where someone had mended a tear instead of throwing the thing away. He left that there, Emma said, voice thin. I do not want to move it. If I move it, I am afraid the air will forget how to be the air he breathed. You can leave it there, Riley said. You can also move it and put a note in the pocket that says where it went. That way the house knows. Emma's eyes filled and did not spill. That is dumb, she said, and then she whispered, I want to do it. They sat with that. The way you sit with a decision that is small and enormous at the same time. From the kitchen came the sound of cups set on a counter. A kettle added its small plea to a room already full and was heard anyway. Janet's voice low, Donna's lower. Rhythms of women making a plan that would not need to be written down to be kept. Will you come back? Emma asked. Not to fix anything, because I want the room to remember this kind of quiet again. Yes, Riley said. I can come after school, and if you want, we can walk inside together on your first day back. Your counselor can meet us by the door. We can pick the hallway where your back feels safest. Emma drew a short breath that sounded like a latch finding its catch. My uncle says, people think bikers are only loud, she said. He says the best thing they do is stand still. I did not believe him. Then I saw the video the neighbors posted, and then I believed him. I do not want to be a video, though. You get to be a person, Riley said. A soft knock. Wade's voice. T. If you want it, or I can leave it outside like a hotel. Come in, Emma said, quick, as if she had surprised herself. Wade stepped just inside and set the mugs on the desk. steam carrying the sleepy comfort of chamomile. He did not meet Riley's eyes, a way of respecting small rooms and the truths that belong to them. On the way out, he touched the doorframe again, a man showing the house he knew how to move inside its rules. They drank and let heat soften the edges of the hour. On the wall, a calendar hung open to a month that had ended, as if time had been waiting for permission. Emma stood, crossed the room, and turned the page. The paper made a sound like snow brushed off a sleeve. "There," she said. "We can keep going whether we want to or not. I would rather choose." When it was time to leave, Riley stood and the chair gave its honest creak again. Emma stepped forward, hesitated, and hugged her with the quick, awkward courage of someone retraining a muscle. The hug was brief and real. "Thank you for coming," Emma said, "and for not talking too much." "Thank you for letting me," Riley said. In the hall, Janet and Donna straightened as if returning tools to a box. Wade offered a nod that held 100 words. He did not need to say. He and Janet exchanged phone numbers with the crispness of people who care about chain of contact. Donna wrote the counselor's name on a small pad and tore off the sheet, handing it to Riley with a look that turned paper into a task and a trust. "If there is trouble," Donna said, "you call. I do not mind being called. It will make me feel like I am doing something other than washing dishes while the world rearranges itself." "We will," Janet said, "and I can drive tomorrow if that feels better." "It does," Donna said quietly. The front door gave its winter groan. Outside, light had thinned toward evening. Cold reached in with careful fingers. Wade walked them to the car and stood back, hands open and empty, that same calm that had unsettled a boy on a different street. "You did good, kid," he said, pitched only for Riley. She lifted a shoulder. "She did the hard part," she said. He nodded, accepting the correction as truth. He tapped the roof twice, a small blessing for travel, and stepped away. In the car, warmth stuttered through the vents. Janet pulled into the street slow, as if the road were a conversation she did not want to interrupt. They drove a block before either spoke. "How was it?" Janet asked. "Not the details. The weight?" "Heavy," Riley said. "Good heavy. Like a coat that fits." Janet's hand found her forearm and squeezed once. "I am proud of you," she said, "and thank you for letting me come inside, and also for not needing me inside that room." They passed the park. The cottonwoods wore dusk like sea glass. The memorial stones held names steady against the coming dark. Somewhere, far off, a motorcycle turned a corner and chose a lane, becoming the sound of a single vow moving away without fading. At home, the house accepted them with familiar noises. Riley set her backpack on the chair and slipped 2 fingers into the hidden seam. The card lay where she had placed it, cool at first, then warm under her touch. She did not need to look at the letters to know them. She touched the edge, as if to mark attendance. Her phone buzzed. "Sage. How is Emma?" Riley typed back. "Brave. Messy. Real." Then added, "Tomorrow we walk in together." The dots appeared. Then Sage answered, "I will meet you at the door. I will bring sugar because grief deserves it." Riley stood at the window and watched evening salt itself into the streetlights. The day laid its receipts in her. The sound of paper turning on the calendar, the taste of chamomile, the feel of a small notepad in a girl's hand, the sight of a jacket on a door, and the decision to leave it or move it with a note in the pocket so the house would know. She touched the sleeve at her knee, then the seam of the backpack, then the cool glass. 3 points, a triangle that anchored the room. Tomorrow would ask for more. She would bring what she had. Quiet. Proof. A steady step in a hallway. The rest would meet her there. Morning moved with the hush of a library before opening. Riley warmed the liner between both hands. settled the socket, and sealed the sleeve with the practiced care that turned nerves into steadiness. The seal whispered. She stood, tested weight, and felt the small answer that meant the fit was right. Downstairs there was toast and oranges, and the clean scent of coffee. Janet squared the corners of her bag as if straight lines could keep a day honest. "Be careful," her mother said. "I will," Riley answered. That was the whole exchange, and it was enough. School breathed her in with heater air and the soft drone that lived in vents. Lockers chattered in bright metal syllables. The intercom cleared its throat and offered small facts, as if facts could keep the wind outside. In English, she wrote about a scene where nobody spoke and everything happened. In science, she underlined a term, and knew Sage would later draw a little comet in the margin, because she liked to turn cold words warm. Her phone buzzed at lunch. A small insect hum against denim. She stepped into the alcove by the trophy case, where the glass smelled faintly of polish and dust. Wade's name filled the screen as if it had been waiting there since dawn. "You got a minute?" he asked. "Yes," she said. Her breath fogged the glass, and the trophies hung very still behind it. Ribbons frozen in formal cheer. "I have been thinking," he said. "The club has been thinking. You stood with me in the park, and we stood with you on the walk. I want to ask for something bigger. Not a show, a statement." "Go on," Riley said. He let a beat pass, respectful, and then said it plain. "The Montana chapter wants to gather. Other chapters want in. We can make a corridor that no one forgets. We want to bring it to your school. We want the kids who watch to learn that kindness can scale." "How many?" she asked. Her voice did not shake, but it moved slower, like a careful step on ice. "Many," he said. "Think a long line. Think neighbors, telling neighbors. Think a number that means people crossed a state line before dawn, because the idea mattered." She leaned her shoulder blades to the cool case until the chills steadied the heat in her cheeks. "I have to ask my mom," she said, "and the principal. There are rules. There is safety." "We know," he said. "We have a plan. We will bring a plan. We will accept no. We will also accept a yes with conditions. We are good at lanes and lines when we choose to be." "Let me try," Riley said. "I will call your mom and be respectful," he said. "Tell her I used the word out loud." She almost smiled. "Okay," she said. "Thank you. Thank you, kid," he answered, and let the silence end where it should. The bell rang. She slid the phone away and felt through canvas the square of the card, resting in the hidden seam like a small heartbeat. Back in the cafeteria, Sage read her face the way people read weather. "What did the sky say?" Sage asked. "There may be a storm," Riley said. Mid-afternoon, the intercom popped once and called her to the main office. Her name sounded official and softer than usual at the same time. The hallway to the office had bulletin boards full of clubs and old posters that leaned on thumbtacks as if tired of their own cheer. The office smelled of paper and carpet and a ghost of copier heat. Wade stood at the counter with his hat in his hands and his edges tucked in. Beside him, a woman with silver hair and sleeves of ink that climbed her arms like vines up stone. Her eyes held the kind patience teachers bring to rooms that need it. She carried a thin folder clipped tight. Riley signed the visitor log without being told, as if students could sign into their own lives when the day got big. The clock above the door was a round face that always seemed a little amused. Its hands marked the moment slowly and without doubt. Principal Anderson stepped from her doorway with a legal pad and a pen that she clicked once and then set down, reminding herself not to bother anyone with sound. "Wade," she said. "Marlene, thank you for coming in through the front door. Riley, come on back." The office had paneled walls that had watched 1,000 small storms, and most of the big ones, a plant worked at staying alive near the window. The radiator hissed an amount that made people trust it. On the credenza, a heavy date stamp sat beside a tray of paper clips, like two old friends. They took seats. Wade chose the chair that let him see both door and window without looking like he meant to. Marlene unsnapped her folder and set a neat stack on the desk. Riley sat where she could see the principal's face and Wade's hand. "All right," Anderson said, "tell me what you are asking." Marlene slid the top page forward. It held grids and arrows and notes in firm handwriting that knew how to keep a classroom focused. "We would like to create an honor corridor behind the school," she said. "Arrival in waves, engines low, no horns. Our own marshals identified by vests, coordination with police and with the city. We stay on the field, not on the asphalt. We do not block buses. We do not enter the building. We present a code of conduct to all participants. We leave, as we came, orderly and in waves. We will pay for off-duty officers to be present if required. We will post road captains at each corner. We will set a medic table near the staff lot. We will clean the field ourselves. We will pick up even the cigarette butts we did not drop." "You are a teacher," Anderson said, almost smiling. "Retired," Marlene said. "The part of me that loves lines and rosters is permanent, and liability," Anderson said. "Who holds it?" "We do," Wade answered. "Our riders are insured. We have a standing relationship with the city from charity work." He slid an envelope across the desk. Clear tape sealed the flap flat. Chain of custody for paper looked like respect. "Security," Anderson said. "I will not invite chaos into my campus." "We brought the liaison's name at the department," Marlene said, tapping a second page. "We will fund off-duty staff if the city requests it. Our road captains will hold corners. We brought a draft radio plan." She offered a one-page grid. Her underline beneath the time looked like a small, straight road. "And why?" Anderson asked. "Say it in one sentence." "Not to the press, to me." Wade glanced at Riley, and then at the principal and said it like a promise. "Because a girl chose not to look away. Because a community can be taught with our bodies what it means to back that kind of choice." Riley felt the words settle under her ribs. She kept her hands quiet on her knees, so no tremor would write a different story. Anderson turned to Riley. "Do you want this?" she asked. "Not the spectacle, the meaning. I want a corridor that says kindness is not a rumor," Riley said. "I want the freshmen who are quiet, and the seniors who think nothing moves to see that lines are not just for games. And I want the boy who jokes when he is scared to learn. He is not the loudest thing in this town." Anderson's mouth shaped a tired smile that still had warmth. "I know which boy," she said. She clicked the pen once and set it down again. "When?" "Friday," Marlene said, "after the last lunch. In place by 2, out by 3. She said the numbers as words, as if that made them behave. "That is fast," Anderson said. "People are already moving." Wade said, "News travels inside our roads. If you tell us no, we tell them to turn around." He said it without threat. He said it like gravity. Anderson looked at the clock, at the radiator, at the stamp, at Riley. "I will need police sign-off," she said. "I will need a public notice. I will need staff positioned and buses rerouted for a short window." She made a line on her pad. "I will need to inform the community. I do not owe them a vote, but I owe them a note." "We brought a draft," Marlene said. She set a small flash drive on the blotter, labeled in careful block letters with the name of the day. Clear tape held the cap. Anderson nodded and slid it aside, as if it held a live thing. "If I say yes, I reserve the right to stop it at the first sign of foolishness," Anderson said. "Yes," Wade said. Absolutely, Marlene said. Anderson stood and crossed to the credenza. She lifted the stamp and brought it down on letterhead. The thunk was heavy and satisfying, an official sound that made the air feel straighter. She signed and dated in words and slid the page back. All right, she said. We do it. We do it with discipline. We do it because a story worth telling becomes stronger in daylight. Riley exhaled and realized she had been holding that breath the whole time. Wade did not grin. He let the room change shape and held the shape open for everyone else. Marlene's shoulders loosened a notch. We will coordinate within the hour, Marlene said. She wrote the time at the top of her copy and underlined it once more. They stepped into the hall. The copier woke and breathed its small, warm smell. Mr. Patterson appeared carrying a mesh bag of cones like a fisherman, content with his catch. Heard, we might need these, he said. I live for cones. Thank you, Riley said, and meant it. They passed the front desk. The receptionist slid a small sign into its slot. Visitors on site. Please be kind. It was not a rule so much as a request. In the foyer, Wade paused. He looked at Riley with something that held pride and caution in equal measure. We will do this right. Kid, he said, we will leave a clean line behind us. Do not talk to the press in the lot, Marlene added. Let the principal speak. Let the kids own their own faces. I do not want to be a video, Riley said. You are a person, Marlene said, and nodded once, as if satisfied with the math. They left through the front. The door sighed. Afternoon light had brightened since morning, and the air tasted of iron and snow. The engines were not yet present, but the day carried the memory of them like a low chord that might return. Wade offered his hand. Riley shook it, because a handshake let the part of her that was still young meet the part that it had to grow up. Thank you, she said. No, he said. Thank you. The door closed behind them, and the office returned to its soft noises and relentless clock. Down the hall, Kyle leaned against a locker he did not own. He wore the look of someone who had planned a small performance and arrived to find the stage already taken. He pushed off the metal and walked toward her. The smell of winter mint gum, mixed with a sharper note underneath, something like resentment warmed in a pocket. He stopped a step too close. So, he said, weddings now. You have friends with loud toys. Must feel nice. It feels like air, she said. The normal kind. The kind everyone gets. He smirked. Careful, he said. The world gets tired of kindness fast. He leaned in the smallest degree. This is not finished. She let the words pass her like a draft that follows someone else through a door. Mr. Patterson turned the corner with his cones, and that ended the conversation for the day. Riley went to the library. She printed the draft statement the principal had approved and slid it into a clear sleeve in her notebook, the way a person who respects chain of custody handles even ordinary paper. She took a photo of the wall clock, of the stamp on the copy, of the corner of the principal's desk where the flash drive had rested. 3 proofs, neat and small, receipts for a future that might need them. After the last bell, she stepped outside. The sky had chosen steadiness over drama. Sage fell in beside her, with hair escaping her hat like a flag of minor rebellion. So, Sage said, did we just become a public service announcement? We became a corridor, Riley said. Better. Sage grinned. A corridor is harder to argue with. They walked home the long way as if distance could make time more obedient. The wind pressed and let go. At the park, the cottonwoods kept still as if listening. The memorial stones held the day's thin light, like a promise signed. Somewhere far off, a motorcycle climbed a hill, and the sound arrived late and true. At the house, Janet stood on the porch with her hands jammed in her pockets. Her face carried a question, and already carried its answer. "Well," she said. "Friday," Riley said. Janet breathed out once. "Then we bring order to Joy," she said. "I will call the counselor. You text Sage's mother. We make soup. We sleep." Riley touched the backpack seam. Then the door jamb. Then the little scar on the banister where a moving box had once knocked too hard. 3 points. A triangle she believed in. Inside, she set the printed statement on the counter, a domestic altar to a procedural god. She wrote the date in words at the top right, and added the hour and circled both. Tomorrow would bring calls and emails, and the quiet rebellion of planning done well. The day after would carry engines and boots and gloves and a hush that did not come from fear. Tonight she would warm her hands and fold her sleeve, and listen to the heater sing the house toward evening. The rest would meet her where the line began. Morning arrived hard and bright. The sky, a plate of enamel blue that rang in the lungs. Riley warmed the liner between her palms, settled the socket, and sealed the sleeve with slow care. The hush of the seal steadied her. She stood, tested weight, and felt the small answer of fit. Today had edges. She would meet them square. Downstairs, Janet moved in clean lines. A nurse and a mother in one body. Thermoses. An extra scarf. A clipped copy of the principal's statement on a small board. The paper squared as if resolve could be measured by corners. "Be careful," Janet said. "We planned," Riley answered. "Planning is not magic," Janet said. "It is respect." Riley nodded and slipped the board into her bag. Respect traveled better when it was warm and written. They parked by the north gate where plows had carved pale ridges into the snowbanks. Heater breath pulsed from the building's doors. On the entry glass, someone had written, "Be kind" in marker, the letters a little uneven from cold. Inside, the office hummed like a patient machine. The receptionist wore her good cardigan and the face she saved for days that asked more than usual. Riley signed in and found Mr. Patterson in the back hall loading cones into a rolling bin. He tapped the bin as if checking a wheel bearing and lifted his clipboard. "We are good," he said. Field edge flagged. Marshals briefed. Medic table set by the staff lot. He smiled in a way that did not brag. "A good corridor is a lesson plan," he said. "It only looks simple when it works." Saja slid in beside Riley, cheeks pink, eyes bright above her scarf. "I brought contraband sugar," she whispered, patting her bag. "Chocolate counts as safety equipment." Riley smiled and let the promise of chocolate sit in her pocket like a small, brave charm. Near midday, the first wave came quiet, like weather you invite, and that accepts the invitation. Engines formed a low chord at the edge of hearing, and then came into view in pairs. Vests marked, visor down, hands steady. The line flowed to the field like an orderly river. Road captains lifting 2 fingers in small signals that moved 100 bodies without a shout. Marshals in plain vests stepped to posts by cone. A silver-haired woman checked a list and touched a radio to her mouth, voice calm and sure. Marlene made a neat mark with her pen, and the mark seemed to straighten the horizon. Riley watched from the rear doors with Sage and a slow knot of teachers who had learned that the right kind of witness is quiet. She felt each arrival in her sternum, the way you feel a drum through a coat. Not menace, mass. The sound asked the building to listen, and the building did. Principal Anderson stepped to the threshold, hands in her pockets, watching the plan find its shape. A police liaison nodded from the staff lot. A cruiser idled without flashers, the brim of the officer's hat level like a ruler. The medic table held a folded blanket and a kit, and bottles set with all labels facing one way. Even the water obeyed the day. By early afternoon, the field was a grid of chrome and dark leather, neat rows cut by aisles that let sunlight stripe the snow. A road captain walked the corridor path heel to toe, counting the way dancers count, then adjusted a row by the width of a glove and gave a small nod to no one in particular. Lines were faith, you could see. Inside, the intercom clicked and offered the principal's even voice. Students and staff will assemble at the rear exit at the appointed time. This is a school event. You will behave like you are standing in a hallway. The pause held the weight. Thank you. The speakers sighed and went still. The doors opened, and the school poured itself out with the careful disorder of a drill run on respect instead of fear. Coats, hats, phones held low. Teachers herded with eyes more than hand. The cold bit cheeks and the mass inhaled as one. A sound moved through the crowd as the field came into view. A human note that lived between awe and relief. It needed no word. Wade waited near the head of the corridor, helmet tucked under his arm, jaw rough, grief worn softer by purpose. He looked toward the doors and found Riley the way a compass finds north. He did not lift his hand. He did not need to. The look was enough. And the line held. Donna stood back with Emma, the girl buttoned into a winter coat with a small horse stitched over her heart. Emma's hand kept a little notepad in her pocket like a private proof. Her eyes found Riley and brightened and steadied. Wade bent and said something low to her and then stepped away, giving the girl the space of her own courage. Principal Anderson climbed a small wooden box the shop class had built that morning and tested it with a boot. She adjusted a microphone that fed no speaker, only the open sky. Her voice cut clean anyway. Thank you for coming outside with your best self, she said. Today we are learning about lines, lines you stand in, lines you hold, lines you draw. We keep this brief and we keep it disciplined. She lifted a hand. The wind obeyed nothing, yet it seemed to listen. There is a student here who chose not to look away, Anderson said. You know her. She is small in size and large in spine. We will not put her face in front of cameras. We will not make a spectacle of a private act. We will, however, use our bodies to tell a public truth. When you see someone hurting, you stop, you help, you do not look away. Wade stepped to the edge of the corridor, not to the box, not to a center. He spoke without a mic, and the day carried him. We are here because a kid who could have kept walking did not, he said. We are not here to scare you. We are here to stand still. We will leave this field cleaner than we found it. We will make a line you can walk and remember, and then we will go. Marlene lifted one finger and two marshals echoed it down the rows. Engines settled to a heartbeat. The corridor breathed. The crowd fell into the hush that honest things make. Anderson looked at Riley. Ready? She asked. Riley swallowed once and nodded. Sage squeezed Riley's shoulder. I am next to you, Sage said. Always. Riley stepped forward. The first motion felt impossible, and then was done. The path between engines ran straight to the staff lot and out to the street. The air held the smell of cold metal and hand soap and wool. Students lined the flanks behind a theater rope borrowed for duty. Phones hovered at chests, not above heads. Some filmed, many did not. Mr. Patterson had cones exactly where cones belonged and looked content enough to live here forever. Halfway down the corridor, Emma left her cluster and came to Riley's side without drama. Matching pace, her gloved hand brushed Riley's sleeve and then stayed at her own side. Riley shifted a breath to share the space. Together became the right number, clapping rows. Not frantic, not sporting, not for a scoreboard, and not for a win. A steady rhythm rolled from the head of the line to the doors and back again. The sound was not even loud. It was layered. It was hands saying, "We see you, and we are not looking away." The corridor answered by staying perfectly still and breathing in time. Near the end of the line, a small child in a knit hat stepped into the path and pressed a folded paper into Riley's palm, then zipped back to a parent. Riley glanced down as she walked. The crayon drawing showed motorcycles with square wheels and a girl with a bright lightning bolt leg. The sun had a grin. "You are brave," the letters said in large, careful strokes. She let the sting in her eyes be part of the weather. They reached the cones at the street and paused because stopping on the mark was part of the ritual. They turned and looked back through the long corridor. The field glittered. Breath hung above the rows like script written in air and erased by the next breath. For a moment, Riley felt herself as one point in a measured line, a small number inside a larger sum. That meant witness and safety, and the discipline to hold shape. Wade came close enough for a private sentence. "You good, kid?" he asked. "Good," Riley said. "Thank you for standing still." "Always," he said. "It does more work than people think." Donna touched Emma's shoulder. The girl breathed out and in and nodded. "We can go when you are ready," Donna said. Emma checked the notepad in her pocket, as if to be sure words could still be written. "Ready?" she said. At the rope, a reporter from the paper lifted a hand. Anderson reached her first and spoke low. The reporter nodded, wrote one line, and capped her pen. She would write about the corridor. She would not name a child. A camera crew from the regional station arrived late and stood at the cones, respectful and frustrated. Their boom lowered like a flag in windless air. Then Kyle stepped out, mistaking a moment for his, hands buried in his coat, chin set for a show. He walked toward the path, as if he meant to cross in front of Riley, like a king testing a bridge. A marshal lifted 2 fingers. Kyle kept moving. Wade did not move. He breathed. Mr. Patterson appeared from a direction no one had watched, and planted a cone in the space Kyle needed to make his entrance work. Kyle stopped. The corridor did not care about his pause. The clapping did not stutter. He stood with the look of a person at a door that no longer opened to his key. He muttered something the wind did not carry, and backed 2 steps, and then 1 more. His mouth made a shape that wanted to be a smile and failed. He folded back into the student line. "Silence is a kind of math, too." Principal Anderson held up the stamped page. The ink gone a little purple in the cold. She read 2 sentences and tucked it away. "The way you tuck a record after it has done its present job. You will go home and tell this story," she said. "You will be tempted to make it bigger in the telling. Do not. The truth is big enough." The clapping softened and landed. Engines rose a fraction for farewell and then settled. Wade looked to Marlene and Marlene to the captains, and a ribbon of small gestures moved the field, the way wind moves leaves. The corridor began to break in waves, not as a shout but as a promise kept. Bikes rolled out the side gate, tires making dark commas in the snow. A captain pointed. A car paused. A driver nodded without a horn. The last pair idled past the spot where Kyle had wanted his moment. They did not look at him. He looked anyway. The machines moved on and took the air with them. Heat stroked numb knuckles. When Riley stepped back inside, the halls smelled of wool and cafeteria, apples, and the faint electric scent of cameras that had been on and then off. Students spoke in low, amazed voices. Some had filmed and watched already. Some had watched and would not need to film to remember. Riley stopped by the office. Anderson sat with the stamp in front of her and a mug that steamed without saying what it held. "You did fine," Anderson said. "All of you did." She slid a fresh copy of the approval across the desk. "For your records." Riley slipped it into a clear sleeve behind the draft statement. Chain of custody felt like comfort. At the trophy case, the glass caught the thin ghost of her breath. In the reflection, she saw Sage adjusting a hat. Mr. Patterson leaning on his bin like a pleased general, and behind them the open doorway to a corridor that now felt like part of the building's frame. Riley took a quick photo through the sleeve of the stamp on paper. Then the clock above the office, then a cone scuffed from work. 3 proofs. The day loved 3s. Outside, neat arcs of tire marks lay on the field like calligraphy. Marlene and 2 marshals walked the grass and picked up a single candy wrapper from someone's pocket and dropped it in a bag with the kind of care that turns cleanup into prayer. Families gathered and left. Donna and Emma headed for their car. Emma turned once and lifted her hand, not to wave, but to mark the day on the air. Riley lifted hers. 2 girls made a line with a small gesture and let it go. Kyle lingered by a dark arc in the snow and toed it with his boot, as if he might erase it. The snow accepted the scuff and stayed a line anyway. He looked up and met Riley's eyes across the distance. He did not smirk. He did not speak. He turned and left the mark alone. When the doors closed and the heaters found their steady song, when cones nested and the medic table folded and the blanket lay smooth, Riley and Sage walked the long way to the front. The corridor remained in Riley's bones, a measured hum she could still hear, if she stilled the room inside her. At the foyer, she reached into the hidden seam of her backpack and touched the card. Paper warmed under canvas. She did not need to read the numbers. Janet texted from the car, "I am at the North Gate. Soup at home." Riley wrote back, "On our way," and added a little steam in a line of words. They stepped into late light. Somewhere far off, a motorcycle turned into a different street, and the sound arrived a moment later. Not prophecy, not thunder, just a low, patient hum. The story would travel, change its coat, collect wrong details, grow brighter or fade. The truth beneath had been stamped in public ink. When you see someone hurting, you stop, you help. You do not look away. Riley let the hum rest against her ribs. Tomorrow had its own math. Tonight, the corridor was enough. Morning arrived, soft and ordinary, as if the corridor had folded itself into the town and gone quiet. Riley warmed the liner between her palms, settled the socket, and sealed the sleeve. The hush steadied the small thrum that still lived in her ribs. Downstairs, the house smelled of onions, easing in a pot and coffee reheated on a gentle flame. Janet stood at the counter with a spoon and a face that said, "This is a day like other days," and also not at all. "Sleeping?" Janet asked. "Mostly," Riley said. "Good, mostly," Janet answered, and handed her a bowl she had no intention of refusing. School breathed back with intolerances. Hallways held the faint wool smell of coats hung to dry. On the backfield, the dark arcs of tire marks read like calligraphy across the snow, a script the wind had not managed to blur. Riley touched the banister scar at the stair turn, then the hidden seam of her backpack, then the cool glass of the door. 3 points. The triangle held, in first period, screens lit faces, with the pale glow of a story traveling, no longer live, already edited. Students watched with the private focus of people checking their own memory against someone else's. In the frame on one phone, Principal Anderson stood on a wooden box and said, "The truth is big enough." In Riley's body, the sentence found its seat again. She did not need to replay it. She already had the original. Sage materialized before lunch, with the look of weather about to change. "We need a minute," she said, tipping her head toward the stairwell where the brick stayed honest. They stepped into the narrow echo of footsteps climbing and retreating. Sage held out her phone. A group thread glowed. Kyle's name sat above a screenshot built to look official. "Health code violation closed, pending inspection," the image claimed. With a seal that wanted to be believed, he dropped it into 3 chats. Sage said, "No caption. Just the picture and a smirk. It smells wrong. The date stumbles. The seal is performative. The link goes nowhere if you press it. But people do not press. People will believe the picture. Heat moved under Riley's sternum in a clean line. Anger that could hold a pencil. Where did he get it? She asked. Someone's cousin. Sage said, someone's private joke. Someone's nothing that wants to be something. What do? We ask for the real paper. Riley said, we do not fight rumor with rumor. We ask for a stamp we can touch. They split the work the way they always did. Sage took the public side. A clean message drafted in notes. A plan to boost Golden Harvest with pictures and one line of intention. We will be there on Saturday at noon. Anyone who wants to eat well and kindly can meet us. No speeches, only directions. Riley took the procedural side. In the library that still smelled faintly of warm plastic and dust, she opened the county health page and typed the restaurant's name. The listing lived where a listing should live. Inspection date. Result. Passed. She pressed print. The printer hummed, then stuttered, then found itself, and fed out the page. She held the paper by its edges, the way you do when you want to keep it credible. She took a photo of the screen with the wall clock in the frame. She slipped the print into a clear sleeve. 2 holes. A click into the binder. Chain of custody reduces doubt. She had learned it without anyone teaching it to her. At lunch, Mr. Chen from the gas station waved through the window as she and Sage split a sandwich with a plastic knife that looked braver than it was. He mouthed something like, "Thank you," and then pretended he had not. Brianna found them by the vending machines with a face that carried both fear and stubbornness. "He posted it," she said. "My aunt sent it to my mother, and my mother is trying to smile and say it does not matter. But it does." Riley showed her the sleeve. "It passes," she said. "This is the county page. Today, we printed, we can show whoever needs to see a stamp." Brianna took a breath, and her shoulders fell the small distance that signals relief. "Thank you," she said. "Can I take a picture of your picture?" "Take 3, Riley said, and held the sleeve at an angle that spared the glare. Kyle drifted near the end of lunch, like a cloud that wanted to be a storm, and had not learned humility yet. He did not look at them at first. He spoke to a boy who nodded too much, and then not at all. He turned, saw the sleeve, saw Brianna's phone framing it, saw Sage's careful smile, and decided to enlist the air. A lot of official documents flying around. He said, "You girls working for the state now, maybe set the cameras down once in a while." Riley kept her voice level and small enough to fit inside the day. "There is a difference between a picture and a document," she said. "One can be drawn, one is issued. If you have questions, you can email the inspector. The address is on the page." His mouth reached for a smirk and came back with something tired. He leaned closer than necessary. "You think you won because some loud men stood around you while you walked," he said softly. "Only for her. You should be careful where you put your faith." Riley listened for the other sounds the day made. The hiss of a milk steamer down the hall, the clack of a chair decided back under a table, a ball thudding the gym floor above. "This is not about winning," she said. "It is about receipts." He stepped back the width of one breath, eyes ticking to the sleeve. He drifted toward the door. It was not a retreat. It was what a person does when a room will not hold his show. The afternoon carried itself in clean lines. In the office, Principal Anderson read the county page, clicked print with the same firmness she used to lower a stamp, and called the health department for a short statement she could send to parents. On the copy, she wrote the time and her initials. She toggled the intercom and spoke 3 sentences about rumor and verification and lunch plans. "We do not chase noise," she said. "We learn, thank you." By last bell, Sage's thread had velocity. The tone stayed practical and warm and little. We will be there and eat and post the truth we can taste. No manifestos. A photo of a menu smudged by hands. A short video of chopsticks tapping a polite rhythm on wood while waiting for tea. Names tagged only with permission. Brianna's mother called the restaurant to ask how many tables could be pushed together, and whether it was all right to write a small sign that said, "Welcome to anyone who needed welcome." Saturday came with light that made edges honest. Sage's mother's station wagon ferried 3 girls and a pile of gloves to North 27th. Golden Harvest Bell gave a bright ring as they pushed in. Heat rose in a wave that smelled of sesame and ginger and oil hot enough to sing. Mr. Chen sat in a corner with a cup of tea cupped like a secret. He looked up and smiled, and did not wave because some moments do not require hands. Brianna's mother greeted them with the face of someone who had been brave for days, and finally had permission to be simply glad. She showed them to 2 tables, pushed together and poured tea, with the sort of care that turns pouring into ceremony. Riley took pictures of menus and tea and steam, and posted 3 images with 3 sentences. "We are here. The food is good. Rumor is not a meal." Teenagers arrived in 1s and 2s, and then in small floods, some shy, some loud, because loud can carry shyness. A teacher came with her wife and asked for recommendations. Someone's grandfather folded his coat over the chair back and ordered noodles, and then ordered noodles again with the peace of a man who had already decided the day would be good. Laughter built not like a wave but like a wall laid true and level. The drawer chimed. The kitchen printer chewed paper steadily. "Work is the best sound," Brianna's mother said, and covered her mouth, as if saying it out loud might scare the sound away. Riley used a slow moment to frame her phone on the county notice, then lifted to the clock above the counter and recorded a short silent video. She posted it without music and wrote the time in words beneath. People liked it with quiet hearts. Some people saved it. Saving felt like voting in a private booth. Halfway through Sesame Noodles, Riley saw Kyle's reflection in the window before she saw him in the room. He stood in the threshold a heartbeat too long, arguing with himself about who he was in this story. He stepped in. He took 3 steps. He stopped at the edge of the push tables and searched for the performance he had rehearsed. It was not there. Riley kept her eyes on her plate until he looked at her, then lifted them so the meeting would not be unkind. He nodded once. Not apology. Not dare. The small muscle movement of a boy who had found the edge of his power and decided not to push, at least for now. He turned to the counter. Brianna's mother came out from the kitchen, wiped her hands, and asked, "What can I get you?" as if this were the simplest question in the world. He ordered fried rice, laid cash on the counter, and did not count his change. He sat by the window and watched the street where cars made bright, quick decisions and left. Wade did not arrive. Marlene did not arrive. They were not needed. The day belonged to small hands and steam and the quiet pile of receipts near the register. Riley finished her noodles and paid and tipped and posted a picture of the little bell with its red string. Her caption held 3 words and 1 period. "The truth eats." That night, the local paper ran a small story above the fold. It used the word corridor once and kindness twice, and did not use any student's last name. The health department posted its own notice and pinned it to the top of the page for a week. The way institutions show their work when asked. The rumor's screenshot kept moving in smaller circles, then slowed, then stopped. Screens prefer motion. Paper prefers endurance. On Monday, the school climbed back into rhythm, like a train meeting its rails. In the cafeteria, Riley watched Kyle step between 2 older boys who were baiting a freshman about his jacket. He did not make a speech. He set a hand on a tray about to tip and kept it from falling. He said, "Knock it off without theater." The boys did. He looked over and found Riley watching and gave the smallest tilt of his chin. Acknowledgement, close enough to an apology to be useful. After last bell, Principal Anderson called Riley into the office not to talk but to file. She showed her where the day's approvals lived. In a gray cabinet, whose drawers slid with the sound of something right, she placed the corridor's signed page into a manila sleeve, stuck a tab, and wrote the month in block letters. "There is satisfaction in ink," she said. "You cannot argue with it the way you argue with rumor." Riley left with the comfort of drawers that hold. At the trophy case, the glass took the fog of her breath again. Behind it, old medals kept shining the way old medals do, steady, indifferent to the new story outside. She took one picture and did not post it. Some things belong to the pocket. At home, evening settled without argument. Soup reheated. Wind put its shoulder to the eaves. Riley set her binder on the table and opened to the sleeve that held the inspection page, the thank you note, and the principal's approval. She wrote the date in words on a small tab and pressed it to the edge. She touched the 3 sheets, one after the other. Government, school, girl. 3 proofs. The triangle held. Her phone buzzed. A message from Wade. "Proud of you. Only that, and enough." Another from Emma. "First day back tomorrow. I can do the hall if you can do the door." Riley typed, "Yes," and drew a small line with 2 dots, walking it like a path. Janet passed behind her and gave her shoulder a squeeze that carried as much law as any stamp. Outside, somewhere far off, a motorcycle turned down a street and chose a lane. The sound arrived late and true. Not prophecy, not thunder, a hum that reminded the night that promises kept do not need volume to last. Winter loosened its jaw a little at a time. Wind that had barked now learned how to breathe. On mornings when the glass did not frost, Riley warmed the liner between her hands, settled the socket, sealed the sleeve, and listened for the small hush that told her the day would hold. She moved through hallways that had learned a steadier math. Noise still rose where teenagers gathered, but beneath it ran a Keter line, the memory of a corridor that had taught the building to stand up straight. Life did what life always does after any bright flare. It sorted, it filed, it made room. Brianna's table in the cafeteria filled and refilled with faces and plates and chopsticks, tapping a soft code on hard plastic. The rumor's cold breath no longer fogged the air. The county notice lived framed near the register at Golden Harvest, a square of paper with a seal that did not need to raise its voice. People pointed with their chins and ordered extra noodles, and told the story in versions that wandered but always returned to a line you could trust. "The truth eats," Brianna's mother would say, and her smile felt like soup. At school, small changes attached themselves to ordinary days. Outside the counselor's office, a corkboard turned into a shelf for folded slips, where students could write a time and a word and leave it for later. The slips did not become confetti. They were read, and answers appeared in pencil at the corner, small as signatures. Emma opened the first circle by laying her notepad on the table and saying out loud what she had been writing alone, that grief is not a chore you check off, that it is a room in the house where you keep the light on even when no one sits there. Others said "me too" in sentences that did not need to be pretty to be true. A teacher brought tea. Someone brought cookies and forgot to eat them. The cookies went stale, and that, too, was an honest fact. Kyle's nose narrowed and then shifted. He still moved like a boy who liked an edge, but he tested fewer doors that were not his. In the cafeteria, he caught a tray before it clattered and did not make a speech about it. In the hall, he stopped a lifted hand and said, Knock it off without theater. He kept his distance from Riley. When paths crossed, he raised his chin a fraction. Acknowledgement and not invitation. Some sentences only need one word, and sometimes the word is enough. Riley kept collecting proof, the way some people gather river stones, not to weigh down the past, but to map where she had walked. The stamped approval from the corridor, the inspection printout behind clear plastic, the thank you note folded into the same sleeve, the edges softened by the touch of her fingers. She was not building a shrine. She was building a drawer that opened and closed without sticking, a place where memory could live without leaking. News traveled like winter light in the afternoon, low and steady. A small paper printed a picture of tire arcs on snow and called them calligraphy. A larger paper lifted the story and shortened it so it could sit between an advertisement for a car and a note about a council vote. On a screen somewhere far away, a caption used a word she did not like because it turned a person into a symbol, and symbols cannot feel the hush of a sleeve sealing or the tremble of a knee finding its balance on cold pavement. She did not correct it. She did not read comments. She poured tea, finished homework, and texted Emma to ask if she wanted to practice the walk from the door to her locker before first bell. Emma said yes with 2 words, and a little horse sketch during math because sometimes numbers want company. One afternoon when the sky wore the color of nickels, Riley and Sage stood outside Golden Harvest watching their breath smear and vanish. Mr. Chen passed with his hands in his jacket and paused as if the sidewalk had a private stop sign. He said winter felt less mean when a place smelled like sesame and ginger. Sage said that sounded like poetry, and Mr. Chen said it was only lunch. They went in together, and the bell above the door clicked a bright period onto the sentence. Spring arrived later than hope, but earlier than fear. Cottonwoods uncurled their fists. Grass made its first stubborn declarations along the fence. Veterans Park traded rigid quiet for the kind that moved. On a Friday afternoon, Riley walked the long way home and paused near the bench where she had first heard a stranger's grief break in his chest. The bench seemed to know her. Names on the memorial held their cold brightness. She sat, not as pilgrimage, only to share air with a place that had seen her learn something. A motorcycle entered the lot. Not loud, just present. Wade rolled to a calm stop and set his boots to gravel, like someone who had learned how to carry weight without letting it carry him. He saw Riley and smiled without surprise, as if he had trusted the day to put them in the same frame. He did not gather her into a hug. Gratitude stands best with space around it. "How you holding up?" he asked. "I am learning to keep drawers tidy," Riley said. "It helps." He nodded like she had spoken a language he knew. "Emma," he said, and the name did most of the work. "She is finding her hallway. She will be all right. It will take what it takes." He pulled a small bundle wrapped in brown paper from his jacket, the kind of package that never announces itself and always means more than it looks. "Emma wanted you to have this," he said. "She made it." Riley unwrapped it carefully. A narrow bracelet of leather lay in her hands, worked by simple tools into shapes that knew her, a line of mountains, the suggestion of a wheel, a small bolt of lightning. Inside, burned by a careful hand, words fit like a hinge. "Choose kindness. Watch what follows. It is beautiful," Riley said. She wanted to keep the first draft and give you the one with the words done right. He said, "Doing it right is another way of telling the truth." They sat the way you sit. When company does not require a topic, the bike ticked as heat left metal. A dog trotted past and pretended it did not want to jump. The horizon opened a little to show that light was not gone, only elsewhere. When Wade stood, he cleared his throat like a man adjusting a chord. "We will not make a habit of grand gestures," he said, "but if you ever need quiet stood in the right place, you call. You have the number. It is not a decoration." "I know," Riley said, "and I know that most of the time the right place is a seat next to someone, and the quiet is the kind you make with your own hands on your knees." He smiled in a way that made space. He put on his helmet, settled into the saddle, and measured the road with a glance. He looked at her once more and lifted 2 fingers. Note qui de salute. More a note in the margin that said, "See you in the pages." The engine found its patient hum, and he rolled away. School turned pages, tests, then events, then a calendar surprised to find itself leaning toward summer. Riley wrote a speech without sounding like she wanted to be a statue. She did not expect to give it. She wrote it anyway. Because words practice courage in private before they stand under lights. In the speech, she wrote about lines, how you hold them, how you draw them, how you stand in them while the world tries to push. She did not mean geometry. She meant the kind of discipline that does not ask for applause. The principal asked whether she would speak at an assembly about what the corridor had taught the school. Riley said yes, if the microphones were not glued to her face, and if the talk could be less about a person and more about a practice. Anderson said yes. A practice. We can teach a practice. She wrote 3 words at the top of a clean sheet in tidy script. Stop. Help. Stay. On the morning of the assembly, Riley touched the hidden seam of her backpack, and the card inside, and the thin archive of days in the clear sleeve. She spoke simply into a room that had memorized the sounds of heaters and bells. She said all she had done was what anyone could do with ordinary tools. She said a prosthetic leg does not make a person brave, and a leather vest does not make a person dangerous, and a rumor does not make a truth. She said the way to change a hallway is to keep stepping until your step becomes the hallway's habit. She said thank you, and stepped back and listened to the room breathe. Time moved in its steady way. Emma returned to class the day she said she would, and when the hall tried to tilt, she found Riley at the door, and together they made a line of 2 and walked it. Brianna's mother added a dish to the board and named it for the afternoon. The dining room filled with teenagers and steam. Kyle learned how to stand quietly for other people's moments, and discovered that quiet has a taste that is not bitter if you let it sit. In late spring, the scholarship in Marcus's name opened its first envelope and changed a young man's year. The club announced it in a room without cameras. Wade sent Riley a photo of a check next to a paper with a stamp, and the frame included the clock on the wall because he had learned what turns a picture into a promise. She texted back 1 word that meant more than many. Good. At home, Janet taped a child's crayon drawing beside the hospital calendar. Above the stove, the bracelet rested on a small hook while Riley washed dishes, then went back to her wrist, then to the hook again, a soft cycle of ritual that kept the house speaking to itself. Sometimes at night, when the quiet was clean and the street hum thinned to almost nothing, Janet would touch Riley's shoulder in passing with the kind of reassurance that does not announce itself. Those touches carried as much law as stamps. Graduation arrived on light. You could taste caps, gowns, the soft chaos of a gym reimagined as a cathedral. Riley sat among faces she had known since they were small, and not yet aware of how rooms change when you decide not to look away. When her turn came, she did not tell the whole story. She did not own it. She carried 1 thread and tied it to a sentence. Choose kindness, she said. Watch what follows. The sentence did not belong to her alone, but she could hold it for a while. Summer unrolled like a road that does not rush you. Riley worked at the community center, and learned that a clipboard can be a tool for kindness. She walked the long way through the park on Fridays. Sometimes she met a dog. Sometimes only the hum of a street where a bike turned without asking the day to notice. She filled a form that said she would study how to help people keep drawers tidy and proofs close, and pressed a stamp down hard enough to leave truth in the paper. The town did not forget, and it did not build a statue. The field where the corridor stood became grass again, then dust, then grass. In late light, if you looked from the right angle, you could almost see faint arcs like handwriting, teaching itself to be patient. A child on a bicycle would ride along those invisible lines without knowing why the path felt easy. Maybe that was the point. At the kitchen table, Riley opened her binder. 3 sheets lived in the clear sleeve. Government, school, girl. She added a blank page behind them, ready to hold the next proof the world might ask for. She set the binder at the center of the table, the way you set bread, where everyone can reach it. She touched the hidden seam of her backpack and the card inside and felt the paper warm to her hand. Outside, somewhere far off, a motorcycle turned down a street and chose a lane. The sound arrived late and true, not prophecy, not thunder, just a steady hum. Riley let it find the chair in her ribs it had been using since the day she chose not to walk past a broken sound. The house exhaled with her. The night held. She slipped the bracelet back onto her wrist, the leather learning her pulse, and stood. Choose kindness, she thought. Watch what follows. At its heart, this story is about the quiet power of standing up, not with anger or grand gestures, but with proof, patience, and compassion. It reminds us that justice isn't always delivered in a courtroom or shouted through a megaphone. Sometimes it's built slowly, one honest act at a time, by ordinary people who refuse to look away. When Riley chose to confront cruelty with discipline instead of vengeance, she showed that true strength is not loud, it's consistent. She reminds us that real gold doesn't fear the fire, and that integrity, though it burns, comes out brighter when tested. We all live in corridors of our own, workplaces, families, communities, where silence can feel safer than truth. But silence also allows harm to echo unchecked. This story asks us to recognize the quiet injustices around us, the dismissed voice, the casual bias, the rumor that becomes a weapon, and when we see them, to act, not by shouting others down, but by standing our ground with kindness, clarity, and proof, because fairness, like respect, begins where someone decides to stay steady. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear what it stirred in your heart. Have you ever witnessed or faced a moment where silence seemed easier, but speaking up mattered more? Share your thoughts in the comments. Leave a like if you believe small acts of decency can rewrite the world, and subscribe for more stories that walk the thin line between chaos and compassion. May you find, amid all the noise, the peace that comes from knowing your truth and the courage to keep walking your own quiet corridor.